So one of my favorite new guitars from 2019 was this guy. This is the Excel Tammany, and this was part of a revamp that D'Angelico did to the Excel line of acoustic guitars. Now, if you're a friend of the channel, you've probably seen this guitar a bunch. I did a full demo and review of this guitar. It has gotten a ton of playtime here in the studio, as well as out on gigs, and I can say with confidence that this is my go-to acoustic guitar at the moment. Now, given my love for these Excel Acoustics, I was obviously pleasantly surprised to hear that the Premier line would be receiving a similar revamp treatment. Now, these bad boys just hit production, and the good people over at D'Angelico were kind enough to loan me a Premier Tammany to check out with you guys and see how it stacks up to the Excel Tammany over here. Now, as I'm sure you can tell at a first glance, these Premier Acoustics are gorgeous and don't look or feel at all like budget-friendly guitars. So let's take a look at how the new Premier line of acoustics stacks up against the Excel line. We'll take a look at some specs. We'll check out, of course, how each of these guitars sound. I think you'll notice some surprising similarities. But first, here's a little sneak peek of this new Premier Tammany. Check it out. So let's talk specs. Now, per usual, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to go over every single little spec. If you want to do that for yourself, do a little side-by-side comparison. I'll leave links to each of these guitars in the description below. What I will do is lay out some key spec differences that I would consider if I were deciding between these two guitars. Oh, and real quick, it is worth noting that while we are looking at this particular Tammany model, a lot of the differences between the Premier and the Excel line will be consistent across each model in that line. I will do my best to point out which of these specs apply to all the guitars in the line. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about one of the first things we notice when we look at the guitar, the available finishes. The Excel line comes in a vintage natural finish, an auburn finish, and then this is the vintage sunburst finish. Obviously, the vintage sunburst was my personal favorite. The Premier Acoustics also come in a vintage natural finish, as well as this really cool red burst finish that they call a trans black cherry burst, and it also comes in this finish right here, which is the iced tea burst. Obviously, I thought it would be cool to compare these two finishes. Now, let's talk body. These guitars have the same shape, the same dimension, and they both feature a solid Sitka spruce top. Where they differ is the Premier line has laminated mahogany back and sides, while the Excel line has laminated stained Macassar ebony back and sides. They both feature this 3-ring abalone rosette, which is surprising to see in a Premier model. The bridge on the Premier model is made of Ovenkal wood, while the bridge on the Excel is made of ebony. And the binding is really one of the things that differentiates these two guitars. On the Premier line, you have white binding, and around the body you have a white and black multi-ply binding. And over on the Excel line, you have a cream binding, and on the body you have the cream and black multi-ply binding. On the backs of the guitar, you can see that the Premier model has this 3-ply binding, and over here on the Excel model, you have a continuation of the cream binding. I do like the 3-ply on the Premier. Moving on to the headstock, both guitars do feature the D'Angelico New York logo in mother of pearl, and the Premier model obviously says Premier on it, and the Excel model obviously says, you guessed it, Excel. But as we take a look at this side-by-side comparison, the glaring difference between these two headstocks is, of course, the hardware. The Excel line features gold hardware, while the new Premier model features this awesome antique bronze hardware. And when I first saw the Premier Acoustics, this was one of the first things that really stood out to me, because while I do like the look of the gold, shiny hardware, definitely makes the Excel model look premium, the antique bronze hardware has just such a cool look and vibe to it. Definitely adds a whole nother dimension to this Premier guitar that the Excel doesn't have. So definitely got to give a point to the Premier on the hardware. As we move down to the neck of the guitar, guitar. Both guitars do feature the same bone nut with the same nut width. And both of these necks are practically identical. They're both made out of mahogany wood. They both have a satin finish on the back for smooth playability. Now when it comes to the fretboard on these guitars, on our Premier model we have an Ovencall fretboard, and on our Excel model we have an ebony fretboard. And yes, that is consistent across all of the models in the Premier line and all of the models in the Excel line. Our Excel models have a split block acrylic pearl inlay, while the Premier models have these acrylic pearl block inlays. And on a guitar at this price point, you usually don't see any sort of fancy inlays. So I really dig that they included these pearl block inlays. It's a super nice touch. Both of these guitars do include electronics, so you will be able to plug both of these guitars in should you so choose to do so. The Excel models come equipped with a Fishman Precis Plus. The Precis Plus comes with all of your standard tuning and EQ controls, as well as some advanced controls like a brilliance knob and a notch knob, which will allow you to do things like roll off some of the low end on your guitar. Definitely one of those nice to have features. And over here, our Premier line includes the D'Angelico onboard preamp and tuner. This onboard preamp and tuner will give you all of the tuning, EQ, volume controls that you need. It's not quite as involved as the Precis Plus, but it does everything that you need it to do. So it's great that they included that in the Premier model. The Excel model comes with a deluxe hardshell case. The case is really nice. It's got a nice velvet interior with a nice D'Angelico embroidered logo on the outside of the case, while the Premier model does not include a case, which for me, not a huge deal. You can easily find yourself a nice soft shell case or gig bag that will complement this guitar nicely. Last but not least, let's talk about price. The Excel Acoustics are currently retailing for $799, while the Premier Acoustics are listed for $499. Definitely a significant price difference. I do think the Excel earns its higher price tag, but you're still getting a great guitar for under $500 with the Premier Acoustics. While all of the specs and bells and whistles are nice, the only true test is to mic these guitars up and see what they sound like. So let's do a little sound comparison and we'll see what we think. Alright guys, so that's going to wrap up the video. I hope this gave you a little more info and insight into the world of Excel versus Premier, D'Angelico Acoustics. If you're in the market for a new acoustic guitar, I think this is a great place to start looking. Like I've said, been super happy with my Excel Tammany. I haven't even had this guitar a year and I've already thoroughly put it through its paces. And the new Premier Acoustics are definitely a welcomed addition to the family of D'Angelico guitars. So I would definitely urge you to check out either of these guitars. I will of course include links in the description below for those of you who want some more info. Listen guys, it's been a pleasure getting to hang with you today. Until next time, my name's Patrick. I'll catch y'all soon, alright? Peace.